Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and today's HTUC video is on Billoforge. Billoforge is a very interesting Lumion that I've analyzed, and throughout all the stuff that I've been looking at, it looks like a really good Lumion, and I wish I made a video on this sooner. So, let's talk about how to use and counter Billoforge. From the counters and checks and teammates you'll need to know in order to know how to use Billoforge in any situation in battle, as well as knowing the sets, roles, and offensive coverage for any Billoforge set you'll really need to know. So today's video is all about how to use and counter Billoforge. So the role that Billoforge plays is an essential question to ask, and we can answer this question with its base stats. Its base stats are really simple because you have two bad stats here. With your speed here being 24, this is really low. This is slower than stuff like Bar Blasts and Cenomars, who are very well known for being very slow. And your range defense here of 61, while it isn't as good as what you'd want it to be, it's definitely something you'd have to be worried about because range attackers can easily take advantage of you, and I'll be talking about this a lot more in the counters and checks section. And your HP and energy, your HP is pretty decent here, although it is not too great because you still have to be worried about most stuff here. You aren't a wall where you can sponge most hits. However, your energy stat is pretty good. This lets you get up to 250 energy pretty easily without much investment. And your melee attack, range attack, and melee defense are all really good stats here. You do have the potential to be a mixed Lumion, but in my opinion, in this metagame, I wouldn't really run mixed because one side of the coverage is so much better in just applying pressure. And your melee defense here is really great. This lets you swap in on a bunch of melee attackers, specifically melee walls, stuff you could take advantage of on, so that is always very good. So, what's the role that Billoforge plays? Well, it is a mixed potential and decent attack prowess. It's not the strongest thing in the world, but it does have the potential with setup to be really strong. And it does have defensive potential with its base stats. Its defensive typing is a different story in my opinion, but do note it still has some defensive capabilities. So, it can be a great bulky offensive or defensive Lumion. Personally, I would just use offensive, but do note that Billoforge probably in most other metagames can probably function as a defensive Lumion. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the offensive coverage for Billoforge. So Billoforge's offensive coverage is really simple. You have to worry about 7 resisting types on you, and that's not really the best. You have to worry about earth types. This goes for your defensive typing as well because earth types hit you 4 times super effective. So think Lumions such as Tyrex, Cenomars, Baneki. Really any earth type, even the Gargolems work as types that can do really well against you, so you'll have to watch out for those. Toxic types aren't too much of a worry, but they do resist your Muck Blast. So you'll have to be worried about these types switching in. However, most of them are Lumions you can take advantage of, other than Halvantic, probably. For your other coverage, Spirit types, really, you'll only have to worry about the more offensive variants such as Ursul, Vesperatu, Revenine, more of the ones that will be used late game to try and revenge kill you. So Spirit types, you'll have to watch out for those. Water types, they're not too much of a worry, but specifically water types such as Barblast will be able to do really well against you, and some variants of Fiscarna. I wouldn't really recommend using Fiscarna for this because Regift is the better ability, but you can try of course. Fire types, they're not much of a worry here, but range ones, specifically Ikazune, Pyrolin, not Pyrolin, more so Ikazune, even some Eruptodon sets can threaten you heavily. You'll just have to watch out for those. Light types specifically, Valkyrie is also a pretty good one to use against you because you don't have other coverage moves other than one to hit Valkyrie. Numare is also going to be a very big problem because it can resist most of your moves. And ancient types, well, only really, there's not much you'd have to worry about because you do really well against most of them anyways. But you do have to watch out for ancient types, specifically offensive ones like Skellig and Zulong. And for your types you hit super effectively: water, plant, brawler, ice, dark, and metal. These are all really good types to hit and will, of course, make your offensive prowess a lot more threatening. So let's talk about Billoforge's offensive set. So the set for Billoforge, we're running offensive like I said, and your ability here will be Blistering Heat, mainly because you are able to utilize this ability with your offense more better than your other abilities. Scorching Skin can be great if you're running more defensive Billoforges, which I won't really recommend, but because offensive already has the defensive potential. But if you do want to run Scorching Skin or other defensive sets, do note that it can be viable, so you can do that. Your personality will be frail, sluggish, very smart. This is going to be very simple stuff here. You just want to hit as hard as possible while lowering the stats you don't want to use. So that's also going to be very good for you. And your item of choice will be the Fire Essence. You can run the Health Amulet if you're not running it on anything else, because Billoforge does have a great defensive typing to take advantage of, so that's always pretty great. But Fire Essence is just your default item. You just want to hit hard with your Fire Breath as much as possible. Toxic Essences are also pretty great if you are struggling with water types more, so do note that Fire Essence is not what you're limited to. And for your moveset, now I heavily recommend Peace of Mind on this, because I'll talking about this later, but Peace of Mind really helps against most of your matchups, even when the stuff you're weak to. And I would replace it for Metal Blast. 4 attacks is just very simple here. Metal Blast, I wouldn't really recommend. This only really helps you against Namare, but you can if you want to run it, but there's really no use to running Metal Blast. However, for your 3 other moves, Landslide is very obvious here. You want to hit the toxic types that we want to, which is very important. Also, in case for other Lumions that we can't hit for super effectively, Landslide can probably chunk them down a lot, so this will be very good for you. Muck Blast and Fire Breath are also your stabs, so that's pretty simple here. Like I said, I recommend Peace of Mind heavily. And as for your TPs, this is very familiar, as this is from my sets video. Also, Jolty, this is Jolty's set. You can tweak the TPs around if you want to outspeed some specific stuff, but I wouldn't really. 28 energy will let you get up to 250. This will let you use 5 Fire Breaths or Muck Blasts or 4 of the moves, and then 2 Peace of Minds. This is very standard stuff. 200 HP in Rage Attack, max those stats out, let you be as bulky and hard hitting as possible. And as for your melee attack, you want to lower that because we're not using any melee attack. And 72 melee defense, of course, you are going to want to put that as much in there so you have as much better matchups against those melee attacking Lumions. If you want to put it into range defense or the rest into speed to outspeed other Billoforges or other Lumions, you can of course want to experiment with the TPs. This is just the base thing you want. So let's talk about the offensive counters and checks and teammates for Billoforge. So I'm gonna mention the Peace of Mind thing that I was saying earlier. As for offensive and defensive counters and checks, there's not really much I could say other than using offensive Lumions that can hit it super effectively, such as Namari, Snagoop, Gargolem Attack, Gargolem Base, you know, Deladrix, and Baneki. Usually earth types offensive wise, specifically ranged ones to hit its weaker defensive side, as well as air types. These are really good Lumions to use against. Particularly Namari is so good for this because other than Metal Blast, Namari just pretty much dumpsters on this thing if it's even a defensive set. Which will also bring me to my next point. You can use defensive stuff such as Barblast and Cenomars. Do note that they are on a counter though, specifically Barblast, because of Billoforge's Peace of Mind, which I will get to, so why not now? With Billoforge, I've been recognizing that most, if not all, matchups against Billoforge, if Billoforge but Peace of Mind's on the swap, there's a really good chance once they're chipped or more that Billoforge wins that matchup. And that's something that I've realized heavily with this thing, and the potential that it really has over most offensive checks. Now do note that this won't work every single time, but it is something to take into consideration. I would usually use Peace of Mind right after, like mid-game of the battle when things are more chipped down. Of course, you can one-shot most offensive Lumions at +1, but you still have to worry about whatever else is coming in. Make sure that you are safe when you Peace of Mind because you're kind of prone to these guys anyway, so make sure that you don't get it taken advantage of. Anyways, with your offensive and defensive typing, or teammates in this case, not typing, you really want to use ice types. I suggest ice types such as Himber, Wintrix, or even a Kalos here. Mainly ice types that have the utility and or offensive paralysis, so they can actually deal with Billoforge's offensive counters and checks. Himber is a really good one here because it checks most of the stuff it gets offensively checked by. Kalos is also kind of the same case because it does have a great defensive typing to take advantage of. However, it's not too great in this metagame, so do note about that. Wintrix is just overall pretty good Lumion. You can use this on Billoforge. However, I would prefer bulkier Lumions, but this works too. If you want to use Icicle, which will help with your defensive matchups and offensive ones because of how bulky and baffling it is, of course, you can use that. And you can use some other generic offensive Lumions such as Totab, Metatoad, and Halvantic. Particularly, electric types do really well with Billoforge just to take out the walls that it does get checked by. So these are the stuff I would use. And as for Totab, Totab is just a generic Lumion that does really well on most teams. However, Totab, in my opinion, wouldn't really unlock Billoforge's true potential when faced with these other Lumions right beside it. So with that out of the way, let's go to the conclusion and talk about my thoughts on Billoforge. So Billoforge is a really good Lumion on paper. I love this Lumion so much. This reminds me a lot about what Chartiki is in this metagame, except Billoforge is a more offensive variant. Chartiki's coverage is really good, and as you can tell, Muck Blast Fire Breath is the same as Billoforge. And with Billoforge being an offensive Lumion that can take advantage of its coverage, Billoforge just really dumpsters on a lot of teams if teams don't prepare for its Peace of Minds and of course its coverage. And you have to really plan accordingly to Billoforge because there's only few chances you can come in on defensive stuff and very few chances you can offensively check it, in my opinion at least. I need to do some more in real text testing, but on paper, Billoforge looks to be a really good Lumion that I cannot wait to use. So, hopefully you found this video informational, so like the video if you do, and subscribe if you want to see more. I will be making more videos on HTUCs that you suggest, so of course do that. And of course, subscribe so you get to see my other videos where I go over a bunch of other stuff, such as analyzing Lumions, overall metagame analysis, and more. Alright, this is Cotton Soup signing off to remember you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.